granted, like I became, and he, like your professor, Geneseo. And he came in and gave a talk kind of like this. And it was so, I just always remember it. I'd never heard of any of the things he's talked about, so it's kind of cool to come back and do a similar thing in a very similar looking room for a similar looking kid. So it's good to be here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our company. Our goal of today is to basically make science and geology and environmental stuff real for you guys, to show you what it's like. You think these rocks and stuff are cool? There's actually jobs you can do with it. That's our goal, is to show you that. Okay? So our company is Hailing and Aldridge. These are just some projects that we have. So we call them projects. We call them where we go on site. We call them our sites. We call the people that work for our clients. So those are some that we're doing here. So our company started way over here in Boston. It was the only office in 1957. It was the first years of geotechnical engineering. Two guys came out of MIT. They were super smart in geotechnical engineering, but there was no consulting. And in Boston, it's really unusual ground surface. There's this blue marine clay. Is that the name of it? Yep. And it's really squishy. And it's really hard to build buildings. If you've ever been to Boston, the buildings are huge. So how do you build really big buildings on squishy stuff? That was our job, was to help them figure that out. So by the 80s, things were growing, right? So it wasn't just geotechnical engineering, like doing things underground, like tunneling or foundation design. It became all things water. So then a lot of environmental services for facility design and construction. How do you de-water? How do you do that stuff? And then the Love Canal. You guys, have you heard about Love Canal, that story? Niagara Falls, really bad contamination. So in the 80s is when the environmental business started, because people were starting to understand that contamination was going to hurt us and we needed to do something about it, right? So in the 80s, we started shifting to that. So by that time, there were several offices along the eastern seaboard, like Boston, Hartford, I think then down in what was then Washington. But then Rochester was the first non-New England office. And I ended up starting it in Rochester, but it wasn't 15 years later. They came to Rochester for the sea soak tunnels. You guys heard about the sea soak tunnels? CSOAP. It stands for Combined Sewer Overflow Abatement Project. And basically, there was the sewers used to come together, the storm sewers and the sanitary sewers, and when a big event, rain event would come, all the sanitary sewers and everything would come out onto the streets.
Oh no.
Right? So the goal was to build this huge storage, literally store the water way, way underneath in these huge tunnels underneath Rochester. And that was our big project, big tunneling project, and that's what brought us to Rochester. And so then we've continued to go west, 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 more and more services, more and more things. So we started in 57 with just geotechnical engineering, but now we're national. We do environmental consulting, a lot of underground engineering, strategic consulting. We keep spreading more and more and more. We basically do what our clients need us to do. Okay? So here's some of the things that we do for clients. These are what we call our services. So you're going to hear today a lot. Is there a religion?
Yeah, if you hit the middle button. Yeah.
So you're going to hear a lot about this from Claire and I. And Claire, also you know Wetlands is over here, right? So contaminated site management is the stuff I was telling you, like all the contaminated sites. What are you going to do about it? How do you investigate what's there? How do you clean it up? Remediation is the word for cleaning up. I'm going to talk about that today. Underground civil, earthquakes, foundation design. I was telling you, Brad, this is where we started. We still do a ton of this. Particularly in Boston, we're extremely well known in Boston, and we're very much expanding across the U.S. also. Permitting, compliant, and operational risk, basically air quality, making sure that facilities are in compliance, making sure environmentally they're in compliance, so they're not putting stuff into the atmosphere, into the ground, that's not the right thing. And natural resources permitting compliance, a lot of wetlands work, and Claire is going to talk a bit about that. Water resources is groundwater resources, particularly in the West, Arizona, California. What are you guys hearing about groundwater and water resources in the West? It's all over the news. What are you hearing? Shortages, drought, right? Lake Powell, all the water resources and reservoirs are going down, 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 right? So I'm going to show you a story that happened in California then, back when the drought was a thing, but it's so much worse now. Surface water. Management consulting, this is actually most of the stuff that I do now. I help clients with strategy development, how do they basically do the work that they need to do with their projects the best way. Design plans and specs, you have to be able to design these systems. field services. This is actually where you guys would come into the business. This is where I came into the business. Claire, did you come in field services? Where did you come into the company?
I came in public work contaminants administration, but I did quite a bit.
Yeah. This is a typical place that you start your work. You start. When I was hired by Larry Smith, I was hired for the Kodak environmental work. And I was on drill rigs and drilling wells and logging rock core, identifying rock core, groundwater sampling that you guys were hearing over at RIT. So that's the typical type of stuff that happens at the beginning of a career. Claire? I'm ready to call it that. Okay.
So I want to tell you a little bit about who we work for. So a lot of times I get asked questions like, oh, you must work for the DEC. We don't work for the DEC. No, they do hire consultants. We don't typically work for them. We mostly work for private entities, businesses. We do work for some government agencies. You can see down here in our infrastructure with roads and transportation. We tend to work a lot with like the things like that. But for the most part, the clients you see up there is a smattering of what we have, but they're private entities. And we separate them by market segments. So we have 8 of them up there. And the reason we separate them that way is because the clients that exist in each of those market segments kind of speak a little bit of a different language. So this is a trigger for us if I'm working for a client in heavy industry. They speak differently than I'm going to work with someone like developers. So in heavy industry, for instance, like at General Motors, they are, they're very hands-on with you. They understand kind of what you're doing. You work together as partners and you can get real technical with them. If I'm talking to a developer, like Alexandra Real Estate, they have no idea. They just want to know, what do I have to do, what the problem is, and how does this affect my deal? My deal. So, we learn these sorts of things as we go along. So we did highlight a couple. National Fuel Gas is a client that's based in Buffalo. That's Western New York, Pennsylvania based. Philips Electronics is located here. General Motors is actually one of the projects I work on. They have a site right here in Manchester on Lexington Avenue. Also work on one in Newport News.
So the types of things we do for the national fuel gas, they do a lot of wetlands delineation, a lot of going out to figure out where the wetlands are. So when new pipelines or new things need to be built, we don't build them through wetlands and we get the right easements from the property owners. A lot of that type of thing. Right? Phillips is a lot of cleanup, site investigation and cleanup with contamination from their previous manufacturing operations. How bad is it and what is it? Is it going to impact anybody? Okay, so that's the kind of
One other thing to point out, sometimes you can get that kind of, so I have an environmental background, and sometimes I get that kind of icky look from people that are like, we work with those people. But the truth is we're scientists, and we're doing the best we can to solve their problems, not to get them out of problems. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it is still somewhat altruistic. We're just doing it from a different place than what someone who might think of environmental work.
Right. Our job is to not get them off the hook. Our job is to help them comply with very strict regulations that exist in New York, in California, in particular, in New Jersey. Our job is to help them do that in the right way that makes everybody safe, everybody do the right thing, but also makes good business sense. So that's our job. So, is this the right level of detail? Do you want us to go faster so they have more time for conversation?
So this is good. Claire, you're going to talk more about wetlands, right? Is that
It's part of the project.
okay? Cool. So when you get to that part, can you talk about like why wetlands are protected in general in New York State or wherever?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you could,
Yeah.
you could interject to say, ask us, like, so we're trying to give the information in the
Yeah.
right way.
No, you're doing a great job.
You guys
This is
should
great.
too, right? Like, I don't know what that means. I remember when Larry Smith came in and he started talking, all I remember they talked about was plumes. Groundwater plumes, groundwater contamination plumes. And it was, most of it was like whale, but like, it was interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want you guys to ask questions, okay?
So there's a lot of words on this slide that I'm going to go through. It just really does a nice job illustrating that the type of people we hire is such a broad range of technical abilities. Most of our staff that work with our clients in the professional services area do have some sort of a science or engineering background, but we've hired economists. We've hired business majors, a lot of specialists, things, data specialists, a variety of different things. These are typically the people that work for us. Each of these have a specific skill set based on what they did in college. Obviously, geologists characterize the soil and rock. Our geotechnical engineers are very focused on construction by considering the subsurface. So as we mentioned, like how the subsurface would impact a building that we built on top of it. Hydrogeologists again focus on groundwater and the impacts of the flow of groundwater on both infrastructure and contamination. Environmental engineers is a more overarching engineer, probably one that would use their engineering background to develop systems that help manage environmental issues. Civil engineers do a lot with stormwater, also with their infrastructure design.
Pardon for a second, sure. So my background is Geneseo geology, and then I went to North Carolina State for environmental engineering / civil. Okay, so that's my background. So then eventually you'll show yours on your too.
We also have mechanical engineers that it's not listed on here, but they spend a lot of time helping develop some of those actual mechanical systems that we use to deal with environmental problems like that. So it'll be for extraction system or a pumping.
And I'm going to show you a pumping system in my project example later. You'll see mechanical engineering will be very involved in that.
The spot-on group here, so chemists, biologists, environmental scientists, natural resources scientists, these are our science folks. They spend a lot of time, they understand our regulations, they understand the chemical data that comes in and how it changes based on time and impacts of other things. Our environmental scientists spend a lot of time with researching historical information, they do a lot of due diligence work. Our natural resources scientists and environmental scientists are kind of somewhat one and the same, but our natural resources group tends to focus more on the wetlands type work and some of that more real field type stuff. So I actually have a background in natural resources. If you ask me what I did, I would tell you that most of my work actually happens in the environmental engineering and chemistry areas. When I started at Haley and Aldridge, those were the opportunities I had. And so I learned kind of a lot on the job, a lot of those things that I didn't pick up in college. So interestingly enough, as long as you kind of got the background, you can kind of fit in a lot of different places.
So the questions you guys have about this, these are the types of jobs that people with environmental and geology type degrees.
So the company as a whole basically consults comments about like the legality, safety, and natural.
Yeah, clients.
Cost.
Yeah, so a lot of the work is building things, so we help them build things the right way. So that's the geotechnical engineering type stuff. A lot of times there's environmental problems from contamination that. Which one? I want to pick one of these jobs that looks coolest to them. You have to pick your job right now. I'm going to go around. Jeffrey first. Which job?
Hydrologist.
Yeah? Contaminated or just straight water resources?
I think a little bit of both.
Okay. The all goes together. Keith. Yeah? Straight up geologist? Good. Field geologist?
Sure.
All right. Francis?
Geologist or
Good. Tom? All right. Cool. Yeah? Good. Got in the groundwater and just took off, and the groundwater flow was very fast. It's 200 feet down in a sandy aquifer. It's moving pretty fast. And so this is the contamination here, and this MTBE plume was going right down here, and it was going right towards these drinking water wells. Drinking water in the 2000s was a really big deal in California. Think about what it would be now, right? So these are really deep down with this really, an MTBE is really stinky. It smells like turpentine, and you can, even at really low contaminants, you can smell it, and it's going to be in people's drinking water. So the regulators were really mad at Tesoro. And they're like, you need to do something right now, right? So we came in to help. So this is your MTBE here, right? What's this? What's in the Brita filter? You ever open one up? A bunch of beads. And the beads are the specialty carbon called granular activated carbon, GAC. And basically, the way that it treats your groundwater, treats your water out of your tap, it's called absorption. The extra stuff that's in the water, like the mini contaminants or the stuff that smells funny or the hard water stuff, grabs onto the GAC, the granular activated carbon, and it filters it, right? So your Brita filter filters your water. We basically put a Big Brother filter way that we did it, this is the MCDP, this is the contaminant. It went into this big river. I'm going to show you this pond, and we basically brought the water up from the ground, put it into this facility that I'm going to show you, in these huge river kind of things. And then, what did that look like? Germs. It's bacteria. Very good, Mike. It's bacteria. Did you know that bacteria